The rain came down in sheets that night, turning the city streets into rivers of neon reflections. Most people hurried past the hunched figure on the bench, their umbrellas tilted against the downpour, their eyes carefully averted. After all, what business was it of theirs if some drunk had chosen a public park to drown his sorrows? They had their own problems, their own lives to worry about. But Maya Chen wasn't most people. She had exactly $17.43 in her purse, 2 jobs that barely covered rent, and a heart that had been broken so many times she'd lost count. Yet when she saw the man on that bench, shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs or simply the cold, something inside her refused to keep walking. Maybe it was because she knew what it felt like to be invisible. Maybe it was because her grandmother had always said that kindness was the only currency that mattered. Or maybe she was just tired of a world where people had stopped seeing each other. Whatever the reason, Maya found herself standing in front of the stranger, her worn-out jacket already soaked through, holding out the only thing she could offer, her presence. The man looked up with eyes that seemed to hold an ocean of pain. His expensive suit, now rumpled and stained, told a story of someone who had started the day with very different expectations. His tie hung loose around his neck like a noose he hadn't quite managed to escape, and there was dried champagne on his sleeve, mixed with something that looked suspiciously like cake frosting. "You okay?" Maya asked, knowing it was possibly the stupidest question in the world. Clearly, he was not okay. He laughed, a bitter sound that got lost in the rain. "Do I look okay?" His words were slightly slurred, but there was an educated accent underneath, the kind that came from good schools and better opportunities. Maya sat down beside him, ignoring the puddle that immediately soaked through her jeans. "No," she said honestly. "You look like someone who's having the worst day of his life." "Try the worst day of my life so far," he corrected, taking another swig from the nearly empty bottle of whiskey beside him. "But hey, at least I'm consistent. When I fail spectacularly. Want to talk about it?" "Why?" He turned to look at her properly for the first time, his eyes focusing with difficulty. "Why do you care? You don't know me. I could be anyone. I could be dangerous." Maya shrugged. "You could be, but mostly you just look sad. And I know what sad looks like. I've seen it in the mirror often enough." Something in her words seemed to crack something in him. The facade of bitter humor fell away, and what remained was just a man, broken and lost. "Her name was Cassandra," he said quietly. "We were supposed to get married today. 3 years together, 200 guests, a venue that cost more than most people's houses. And she didn't show up." Maya's hand found his without thinking, her fingers squeezing gently. "I'm so sorry. Want to know the best part?" He laughed again, but this time there were tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I was standing there at the altar, in front of everyone I know, and her maid of honor came up and handed me a note. A note, not even the courtesy of a phone call. Just 3 sentences on hotel stationery. 'I can't do this. I don't love you enough. I'm sorry.' That's horrible," Maya whispered, and she meant it. She'd been poor her whole life, had struggled and scraped and survived on determination and ramen noodles, but she'd never experienced anything quite like that kind of public humiliation. "The thing is," he continued, his words coming faster now, as if a dam had broken, "I don't even blame her. Not really. She was right. She didn't love me enough. Maybe I didn't love her enough either. Maybe we were just playing the parts we thought we were supposed to play. Successful CEO marries successful lawyer. Picture perfect couple. Picture perfect life. All of it a lie." "CEO?" Maya asked before she could stop herself. He waved his hand dismissively. "Doesn't matter. Money doesn't matter. Power doesn't matter. None of it matters when you're standing alone at an altar, realizing that the person you thought you knew never existed at all. That maybe you never existed either. You were just a role. The wealthy heir, the dutiful son, the perfect catch, but never just me. Never just Alexander." Maya didn't know what to say to that. Her problems had always been so concrete, so immediate. How to pay rent, how to afford her mother's medicine, how to make $17 last until her next paycheck. She'd never had the luxury of existential crises about identity and authenticity. But pain was pain, she supposed. It didn't care about your bank balance. "I'm Maya," she said instead. "And for what it's worth, Alexander seems like a pretty decent guy. At least you care enough to be hurt. At least you're real enough to fall apart. That's more than a lot of people can say. They sat in silence for a while, two strangers sharing a bench and a moment of honest vulnerability in a city that thrived on pretense. The rain began to ease, turning from a downpour to a steady drizzle. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Life went on, indifferent to their small tragedy. "Are you hungry?" Maya asked suddenly. "There's a diner a few blocks from here. It's nothing fancy, but they make a mean grilled cheese. And their coffee could probably wake the dead." Alexander looked at her like she'd just suggested they fly to the moon. "You're inviting me to dinner. You realize I'm drunk, covered in wedding cake, and currently wanted by about 50 members of my family who are probably scouring the city for me." "Well, you can't stay on this bench forever," Maya pointed out practically. "And something tells me you haven't eaten all day. Come on, my treat, your treat." He shook his head, something like wonder crossing his features. "You don't even know me." "No," Maya agreed, "but I know what it's like to be alone. And I know that sometimes, the only thing that keeps you going is someone else deciding you're worth their time, even when you don't feel worth anything at all." The diner was exactly as Maya had promised. Nothing fancy, with cracked vinyl booths and flickering fluorescent lights, but warm and dry and blessedly empty at this late hour. They slid into a corner booth, and Maya ordered 2 grilled cheeses and 2 coffees with the careful precision of someone counting every dollar. "So," Alexander said, sobering up slightly thanks to the coffee, "tell me about you. It seems unfair that you know about my disaster of a life, and I know nothing about yours." Maya hesitated. What could she possibly say that wouldn't sound like a plea for pity? That she worked double shifts at a nursing home and a grocery store. That her father had died when she was 12, leaving her mother with depression so severe she could barely function. That Maya had put her own dreams on hold indefinitely to keep their small family afloat. That she'd learned to smile through exhaustion and pretend that happiness was a choice you could make, rather than a luxury you couldn't afford. "I'm nobody special," she said finally. "Just someone trying to get by, same as everyone else." "Nobody special." Alexander leaned forward, his eyes suddenly intense despite the alcohol still in his system. "Nobody special stops to help a drunk stranger in the rain. Nobody special spends their last few dollars buying dinner for someone they just met. You're not nobody, Maya Chen. You're somebody who still believes in kindness in a world that's forgotten what it means." Maya felt her cheeks flush. It's just what decent people do." "No," Alexander said firmly. "It's not. Decent people walked past me for 3 hours before you stopped. Decent people saw a problem they didn't want to deal with and kept walking. You saw a person. They talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing." Maya told him about her mother, about the poetry she used to write before exhaustion stole her words, about the small apartment she called home that was falling apart but still felt like sanctuary. Alexander told her about the pressure of being born into success, about the company he'd inherited at 25, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people who wanted things from you but never just wanted you. By the time they left the diner, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the city washed clean and glistening under the streetlights. Alexander insisted on walking Maya home, despite her protests, and stood outside her building looking more sober and more lost than ever. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For tonight, for seeing me when I felt invisible. I won't forget this." Maya smiled, tired but genuine. "Take care of yourself, Alexander. And remember, you're allowed to fall apart. Just don't stay broken forever." He nodded, and then he was gone, disappearing into the night like a fever dream, leaving Maya to wonder if any of it had really happened at all. 3 months later, Maya was working her morning shift at the nursing home when her supervisor called her into the office with an expression Maya couldn't quite read. Sitting behind the desk, looking impossibly out of place in his tailored suit, was Alexander. "Maya," he said, standing up with a smile that transformed his entire face. "I've been looking for you." "What? How did you?" she stammered, completely thrown. "You'd be amazed what a determined CEO with too much money and too much time can find out," he said, and there was that self-deprecating humor she remembered. "I wanted to thank you properly. And I wanted to offer you something." "I don't want your money," Maya said immediately, defensive. "I know," Alexander said gently. That's exactly why I'm here. Maya, you spent that night taking care of a stranger when you could barely take care of yourself. You showed me kindness when I was at my lowest. And I've spent the last 3 months thinking about what you said. About being real. About being more than the roles we play. He pulled out an envelope and set it on the desk. This is a college scholarship. Full tuition, 4 years, any school you want. No strings attached. You mentioned you'd always wanted to study education, to become a teacher. Here's your chance. Maya stared at the envelope like it might bite her. I can't accept this. Why not? Because I didn't help you to get something in return. I helped you because it was the right thing to do. I know, Alexander said again. But Maya, letting people help you isn't a weakness. It's not charity. It's allowing the universe to balance itself out. You gave me hope when I had none. Let me give you opportunity. Not as payment, but as gratitude. As friendship, if you'll allow it. Tears filled Maya's eyes before she could stop them. I have to take care of my mom. The scholarship includes a stipend. Enough to hire a part-time caregiver and cover your expenses. I've thought this through, Maya. Please, let me do this. Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the broken man from the park bench, but someone who had pieced himself back together and found purpose in the process. She thought about her grandmother's words about kindness being the only currency that mattered. Maybe receiving kindness with grace was just as important as giving it. Okay, she whispered. Okay, thank you. Alexander smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. No, Maya, thank you. You saved my life that night, even if you didn't know it. Now let me help save yours. As Maya walked out of that office, scholarship in hand and future suddenly bright with possibility, she thought about that rainy night 3 months ago. About how a moment of compassion had changed 2 lives irrevocably. About how the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways you could never predict. She'd been poor all her life, had struggled and suffered and survived on determination alone. But in that moment, holding proof that dreams could come true and kindness could be rewarded, Maya felt richer than any millionaire. Because she'd learned something money could never buy. That in our darkest moments, when we're at our most broken and vulnerable, sometimes all it takes is one person who chooses to see us, to sit with us in the rain, to remind us that we're not alone. And sometimes, miraculously, that person changes everything.